Hi, everybody. This is Group 6, and our topic was OpenAI and Microsoft Partnership Alliance. Our group members are the following: Michaela, Lorenzo, Francisco, Alexi, and myself, Vanessa. So, getting started with the issue here between Microsoft and OpenAI. OpenAI is trying to balance its mission. Microsoft is seeking competitive advantage. They are having structural misalignment. It's just another way of saying mission versus profit and dependency versus power. So the partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft has grown tension as both companies are trying to balance different goals. The original alignment between mission-driven AI development and commercial scaling is becoming increasingly strained. There is uncertainty over control, governance, and decision rights. Mission versus profit, and its misalignment, it's at its foundation. So OpenAI's goal was just to create safe, controlled development, while Microsoft, on the other hand, was just prioritizing speed, scale, and its return on investment. Where AI depends on Microsoft for cloud infrastructure and capital investment, as creating AI is very expensive. Microsoft depends on OpenAI for frontier AI innovation. So overall, the core issue is not the partnership in itself, but the current structure between support, mission alignment, and profit motives, and control over AGI, which is just power over extreme economic and strategic value.
Hello, I'll be focusing on the internal analysis as it relates to the case with Microsoft and OpenAI. To put things into perspective, I'll discuss the SWOT analysis, then move on to the Viro analysis, and then finish with the Porter's generic value chain. So when we take a look at OpenAI and discuss SWOT, and when you think about the strengths, OpenAI is the leading cutting edge branded idea that's been around for a while, that has a reputable name and that everybody recognizes, especially today when OpenAI has branched out, or AI in general has branched out and has become so popular. So we can consider our time as the time of the AI boom. Also, a strength is top talent. In our class text and case, we read about people being employed by OpenAI that sign contracts that are worth up to even $1 million, but $2, $3, $400,000 contract salaries are not uncommon. The W for the weaknesses, it costs a lot of capital to be able to run these systems. You need large computing power, which also translates to having large warehouses that have servers that require quite a bit of energy to run. And OpenAI in and itself does not have this. It needs to partner with other entities to be able to make this happen. So in a sense, it needs the big tech, we say, like Amazon and Microsoft, Google. But yet the concern is, in which this case addresses, is that OpenAI in its humble beginnings was a non-for-profit structure, but yet it needs these resources. So how can it manage to acquire these resources is the question. O for opportunities. They do have an opportunity to restructure their non-for-profit and also a capped profit strategy. and later in the presentation that will be addressed. And they're legally required to balance shareholders and public interest because that's built into what they've become today. Lastly, T for threats. As of today, there have been quite a bit of other platforms that have branched out and created their own models for AI, including even other countries. So the landscape is becoming very interesting and competitive. The question becomes, can OpenAI still support public interest when you have so much competition? As another piece to the internal analysis, we'll focus more on the competitive advantage of OpenAI. And we'll be using VRIN as a baseline to perform the analysis. So what does OpenAI have that's valuable, right? It's been proven more recently that it has amazing capabilities equal to that or greater of even human performance. And the tech is very desirable. Um, and even so, most of the large tech companies are even cashing in on implementing AI tools for people to subscribe or use. So the second piece is the rare, uh, and here we could more focus in on the talent. If you were employed by AI or any organization that deploys AI tools such as OpenAI, your skills are very unique. You could probably land a job very quickly with great pay. Uh, so it's popular. The growth projection is amazing. So that's another competitive advantage of OpenAI because they have that top talent and they could attract that top talent. The I for imitate is easily to imitate. Um, OpenAI established itself more as a brand name. Um, it's not very easily imitatable because it just needs so much talent and skill and resources um, to be able to develop and even run these programs. So very difficult to imitate. So the cost of new entrants is very high. But it is becoming more mainstream, and as previously stated, other countries, specifically China, um, is coming out with their own AI models. And lastly, um, non-substitutable. Again, here the concept isn't substitutable, but you could take that and branch out and create your own AI models to run, just like DeepSeek from China isn't a good example. So, are these great competitive advantages of OpenAI? Absolutely, but they do need to stay on their toes to continue to develop and fund their research. And lastly, as far as internal analysis, we'll briefly talk about Porter's generic value chain. And it'll be simply broken down into two categories, and that is the primary and supporting activities. Some of the primary activities is making sure that there is data. There's data that's available online for the end user. And in doing so, you need to have the computing power, which that's where most of the partnerships and the big tech companies come in. Example here is the Azure platform, and then also the ability to be able to for the end user to input prompts and to be able to push the correct answers to those prompts. Um, AI development uh, that can interface with other platforms. So at its core, OpenAI at the core, but it needs to be able to interface with all these other types of end user platforms. And lastly, marketing and continued updates. The system needs to improve on being able to generate and compute answers based on prompts. It just needs to be able to do that continuously to stay in the game. As far as the supporting activities, there needs to be ownership and structure, which is what this case is largely about. Um, HR, HR needs to recruit top talent and perhaps invest in its people to continue to train them and grow them in their skills, as this is a cutting edge developing field. Um, Technological developments, as stated, you need to invest in the people, but also in the infrastructure, in the partnerships. That needs to be continuous. And lastly, the infrastructure. Uh, you need the partnerships, and you need to have entities as partners that do have the resources, that do have the infrastructure and the funds to be able to accomplish the desired goals of continuous improvement as it relates to the OpenAI AI field in general.
External analysis, Porter's five forces. So when I look at Porter's five focus for the AI industry, the first thing that stands out to me is how competitive it is. There are major companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta all investing heavily in AI. So these companies have a lot of money, a lot of talent, and infrastructure, which makes competition very intense. So for OpenAI, this means they have to consistently improve their technology just to keep up. Another important force is a threat of new entrants. I would say this is low to medium because it's actual very difficult to enter this industry. So you need a lot of resources, including advanced technology, skilled engineers, and access to large amounts of data. Not many companies can afford that. However, we still see the smaller startups entering that space, so it's not completely impossible. So now the bargaining power of suppliers is very high in this industry. So OpenAI depends heavily on cloud providers and specialized hardware like GPUs. Since there are only a few companies that provide these resources, like Microsoft Azure or AWS, they have a lot of control. So this makes OpenAI a very dependent on its partners, specifically and especially Microsoft. So when it comes to buyers, I think their power is moderate, right? So users have many AI tools they can choose from, and switching between them is not very difficult. So at the same time, companies like AI still have strong demand because of the quality of its products. Finally, that threat of substitutes is also moderate. People can still rely on human work or other softwares instead of AI. But as AI continues to improve and evolve, this threat may decrease. Overall, I see this industry very competitive, expensive, and difficult to enter, which puts a lot of pressure on the OpenAI to keep growing and innovating. External analysis, the pestle analysis. So external analysis and some of the key insights. So from both analysis, to wrap everything up, the AI industry is both highly competitive and very expensive. Based on Porter's five forces, we can see that OpenAI is operating in a tough environment with strong competitors and powerful suppliers. At the same time, the pestle analysis shows that there are many external factors influencing this company, including regulations, public opinion, and even legal challenges. So these factors make it even harder to succeed in this tough market. In my opinion, the biggest challenge for OpenAI is finding the right balance between growth and its original mission. The company needs to continue innovating and attracting investment, but it also needs to make sure it is developing AI responsibly for its users. If OpenAI can manage this balance, it has the potential to stay a leader in the industry. But if it leans too much on one direction, either focusing only on profits or only on mission, it could face serious challenges. Overall, this case shows that success in the AI industry is not just about technology, but also about strategy, partnership, and responsibility to its users.
From an existing or potential and corporate social responsibility, there is a deceptive pivot claim being seen, whereas originally OpenAI was founded as a nonprofit with a clear mission in mind, and it was to develop AI that benefit all humanity. However, over time, the company transitioned into a capped profit model and became closely tied to Microsoft through significant investment and infrastructure support. This shift triggered a lawsuit that Elon Musk, who argued that OpenAI abandoned its open source, nonprofit mission and effectively became a closed source, profit driven organization aligned with Microsoft. From a CSR standpoint, the issue here is trust. Stakeholders, including employees, researchers, regulators, and the public, may feel misled. The company's legitimacy was built on its mission, and any perceived deviation creates reputational risk and raises governance concern. So this isn't just a legal issue, it's a credibility issue that impacts long-term stakeholders' alignments. There is a core ethical dilemma here. Safety versus speed. On one side, there are strong pressures to move fast. AI development requires massive capital investment, and investors expect returns. At the same time, competition from companies like Google, Anthropic, and xAI is accelerating the pace of innovation. Faster product releases directly impact revenue growth and valuation. But on the other side, OpenAI's original mission emphasizes safety and responsibility. Developing AGI requires rigorous testing, governance control, and ethical oversight. Rushing development increases risk like misinformation, bias, misuse, and broader societal harm. So the tension here is strategic. Do you prioritize rapid commercialization to stay competitive, or do you slow down to ensure responsible development? This trade-off is at the heart of OpenAI's ethical challenges and directly affects its CSR positioning. To address these risks, my recommendation is implementing a structured third-party ethics audit. First, an independent audit board should be established, separate from management and investors, to ensure objectivity. Second, the scope of the review should include AI safety protocols, governance structure, transparency practices, and alignment with the company's original mission. Third, reporting should be transparent and consistent, shared with regulators, stakeholders, and the public to rebuild trust. This approach does two things strategically. It reduces regulatory risk by showing proactive governance, and it reinforces credibility by demonstrating accountability beyond internal controls. In a high-risk, high-visibility industry like AI, independent oversight is not just a compliance tool, it's a competitive advantage.
For my recommendation, I suggest that OpenAI fully transition into a public benefit corporation, or PBC. This would replace the current capped profit model with a more traditional equity structure. This change would also create a clear equity path for both employees and Microsoft, which is important because Microsoft is a major investor and provides most of the company's power. Overall, this shift would improve fundraising ability and create a more stable and transparent structure for long-term growth. This recommendation is driven by several key issues in the current structure. First, Microsoft plays a major role as both an investor and a provider, but the current setup creates a misaligned incentives. Second, the capped profit model limits how much capital OpenAI can raise, which becomes a problem as the company scales. Finally, the governance instability, especially highlighted by the 2023 leadership crisis, shows that the current structure is not stable enough for a company operating at this scale. The main benefit of transitioning to a PBC is that it allows OpenAI to raise venture scale funding while still keeping its public benefit mission. It also aligns incentives across employees, Microsoft, and investors, which reduces internal tension. Most importantly, it creates a more stable structure while still legally protecting the company's mission to ensure AI benefits to the public. One of the biggest risks in the case is the 2025 restructuring deadline. If the OpenAI fails to complete the transition in time, investor funding could convert into debt, which would create a major financial pressure and limit future fundraising ability. To reduce the risk, the company should start restructuring immediately, keep investors aligned throughout the process, and prepare backup options like bridge financing and deadline extensions if needed. This solution works because it directly addresses the core problems in the case. It removes funding limitations, reduces governance instability, and makes the Microsoft partnership clearer, especially around AGI-related terms. Overall, this creates a more stable and predictable structure that improves investor confidence and supports long-term growth. The transition would happen in 5 phases. First, in the first 6 months, OpenAI would focus on governance changes like restructuring the board and defining a decision-making authority. Next, between 6 and 12 months, the company would complete the legal transition into the PBC. Then, between the 12 and 18 months, the focus shifts to equity alignment and updating the Microsoft partnership. Between the 18 and 24 months, the goal is financial stability and eliminating the risk of debt conversion. Finally, ongoing efforts would focus on ethics and oversight through audits and transparency measures.